here we are. Here I am. There you are, out there, somewhere, listening. Welcome. I am Eve Sturgis. I'm here to talk about DNA surprises. This is a podcast called Everything's Relative. I found out that my family had a big old secret about who I really was or who I really am related to, which was also a secret about my parents and their marriage and their relationship. And it's a secret about my childhood. And when it all came out, I was rocked to the very core, my very core. And then I found out that I'm just one silly little person in this huge growing population of people experiencing the exact same thing. It's often from recreational mail-in DNA kits that you see advertising their sales all the time. Can you imagine? I was rocked to my core. I'm still rocked and processing this lifelong information, this information that's always changing. I mean, it's always processing. Just hang around. You'll understand what I mean. But anyway, that's why I started this podcast, because I wanted other people to know they aren't alone. And I also wanted to capture this moment in time, because I think at some point in the not so distant future, everyone's DNA is going to be so accessible that no one would or will dream of trying to keep the secrets, the kind of secrets that we're uncovering here. So yeah, that's what we do here. It's all about that. If you've been listening for a while, you may have noticed that lots of people come in here to talk about the book they wrote or the podcast they have, or, other projects about their DNA discovery, and like how it's informed some kind of like creative or entrepreneurial venture. And I love doing that. I'm so happy to provide a platform for others. And I also know and love that it wasn't always like that. My first season especially was just so much slightly simpler. Like I just had people come on to tell their story and nothing else. It was really straightforward. So I sort of have an affection for that kind of episode. And that's what we have here today with Jennie. Jennie reached out with, among the seemingly thousands of others who recently contacted me when I said I just had a few spots left. So we met on Zoom. We met in my wonky office, or me in my wonky office, and she in her son's bedroom near a bunk bed. You guys ever think about how Zoom takes us into people's lives in a new way? We see anyway, you get it. Anyway, okay, I'll stop talking. I'm with Jennie. Here she is. Okay, so every time I point to you, you say something cool, okay? Hey, Dallas, do you want to make a podcast?
Yeah, sure.
Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money.
Wow, that's awesome.
All in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. And here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters.
I don't know how it works.
It's okay. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. So no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today.
Cool. Can we set it up now?
Yeah, and then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard.
Awesome.
Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch.
Wow, I'll download it right now.
Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, food tastes better, wine tastes sweeter, and I'm a better mother to Dallas. Isn't that true?
Yep.
I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Jennie, so tell me where you are and, a little bit about like where you grew up and then how do you tell your DNA discovery story?
Okay. So I grew up in New Mexico. And my dad and mom were married. They met in Washington, and then my dad was in a wheelchair. So,
Okay.
but I always knew that as as a kid, and it was just never anything that was like any red flags to me. But I grew up in a loving home. I mean, I never felt unloved. I am an NPE. I found out when I was 42. So, and now I'm 45, so it's almost been 2 years. Um, anyway, so I've always been interested in genealogy and family history, and I always think I'm kind of nerdy in that way. Like, it's so cool, you know, where did we come from? And we all like, I don't know, there's an author, Richard Scarry. Do you know, are you familiar with his book?
His little animals.
Like, yeah, and he used to show these books with like these little animals, in real life, and you like look from above and they're like doing things. And I've always been like, oh my gosh, that's just like how life is, everyone kind of has a path, and we all came from somewhere, and the person you drive by is going somewhere. I don't know. Anyways.
Life as a Richard Scarry illustration. That's amazing. And your parents stayed married your whole childhood?
They stayed married my whole childhood. It wasn't the best marriage necessarily, but yeah.
And they, and were you, did you talk out loud about your interest in history and genealogy and things? Like, were they aware that you liked these things?
Yes. So I am like the keeper of the photos. Like, I'm a photographer, and I was like, if you die, I don't want any of your furniture. I don't want any of those things. I just want the photographs. And my mom had done a whole history of her side. Like, I have 2 books full of her, like, whole side of the family. And she never got around to doing all of my dad's. She like started it, but never got around to doing it all.
Okay. And so, is this Latter-day Saints related at all?
No.
Just
no.
Family records on her own. Okay.
I had a couple friends do 23andMe, and they were showing us their ancestry and their 23andMe results. And look at this little pie chart. And isn't it cool that you can see, how much German you are and how much English you are? And I was like, this is fascinating. I want to do this. And so my husband was like,
it's for recreation. I have one more question about growing up. Did you have siblings?
I did have a sibling growing up. She recently passed away, unfortunately, in April. Yeah, she was 43. So we live in different states. But I did have a sibling. We're 2 years apart. So and we couldn't be more different, but I'll get into that a little more in a little bit. But so I told my husband I wanted to do 23andMe, and there was a sale, of course, there was a sale.
Always is.
I know, right? Just wait.
And just wait a couple weeks, and there will be some holiday that makes there be a sale.
Yeah. And so I went to my mom in a joking way. She was here visiting, and I was like hit her on the arm, and I was like, ha. It's like, I'm going to do 23andMe. This is going to be so amazing. If there's any skeletons in the closet, this would be the time to tell me. Totally joking. And then she didn't say anything, just total blank face, didn't say a word, just was like, and then we went on. And then 8 weeks later, I got my results back.
I was waiting for you to say and so she went in the other room, and then she came back in and said,
oh, no.
Fill in the blank. No, just a blank face. And then she was like, that was as much. She couldn't handle it. Okay.
Yeah.
Continue.
So then 8 weeks later, she had come back to visit. Her and my stepdad came back to visit, and they had been here for the weekend. And I remember I was in church on a Sunday, and I got that little notification on my phone, your results are ready. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I can't wait to get out of church and like go look at my DNA relatives and find my cousins on there and how we connect, and just validation, I guess, I don't know. And I got home and did all that, and my husband actually was at work, and it showed that I had 5 half siblings.
Oh, wow, that's a lot of siblings to just pop right up. I'm sorry, you said your mom and stepdad were visiting.
Yeah, so my father, so he my birth certificate father, but he's
Mm-hmm.
my dad. So my
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
dad died when I was 23
Okay.
of osteosarcoma, cancer of the bone.
Ouch.
So my mom remarried, and he's an
Okay.
amazing man, and he's wonderful. So yeah.
Okay.
So
And then
my
and they were there. But they were with you. Were they with you at church when you
no,
got
they
the
were
notice?
actually on their drive home.
Okay. So they had
Yeah.
visited that weekend. They were on their way home. You were just centering yourself at church, and now you have five half siblings.
Yes. So I went next door to my friend who is also in the same spot as me, and she like loves genealogy and has done all the things. And she's like, I can help you, like, with your dad's, because I was like, I want to finish my dad's side of the tree. And like, so I went next door, and I asked her, and I was like, hey, what is this? And she's like, I think that she kind of knew, but she was just like letting me, because I think you kind of
Mhm.
go into shock, you know? And so I called my mom up and I was like, listen, I got my results and I don't hate you. I'm not gonna disown you, but I'm 42 and I need you to tell me the truth now. Now's the time to tell me the truth.
Here is your
To which,
opportunity.
yes, like
Mm.
telling you that it's time to let skeletons out of the closet wasn't a good time. But um, so she started bawling, as
Mm.
most moms do, and I said, she told me, she said that your dad and I loved each other and we got married, but then we found out that he couldn't have children. So we went to your grandparents, my dad's parents, and asked them if they cared if we adopted or used a donor. And they said they would prefer to use a donor. So my dad had been in a wheelchair since he was 14. He had had a tumor in his spine and it popped. He was playing basketball. The tumor popped. They went in and did surgery and then like it cut off a nerve.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think, and back then there's all this shame, right? Like you just
Mm-hmm.
don't talk about things. Everyone kept everything in. So I told my mom that she needed to tell my sister. My sister needed to hear it from her and that I wasn't going to keep it a secret. So the sooner than later route was the
You told
best.
her that right away. Same phone
Right
call.
away.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Same phone call. And then she had and I said, and in person would be best. So she did that and cried her way through it and all that stuff. And um, my sister and I got on a phone call with her together and asked all of our questions and, like how and why and what was it like, you know. And then, the shock wore off and you start feeling like all of those, so I found your workbook.
Mm-hmm.
Who even am I anymore? Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I told I see a therapist once a week. I called my therapist, who I actually hadn't seen in a while. So, and I said, hey, are you taking new patients? Because I need to see you because I have like this huge thing, And so she's like, oh yeah, I'm taking patients. So her and I started working through your workbook together.
Cool.
So yeah, so that was kind of like how I found out. And it does kind of just, I've gone through like all the stages of grief per se, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I love my dad. But we were never close with his family. I never spent a Thanksgiving or a Christmas with his family. No holidays. We maybe went up there once in the summer, but we drove. So from New Mexico to Washington, that was pretty far. Um, but now looking back, so Danny Shapiro talks about the unthought known. So are you familiar with that? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So after reading her book, I was like, oh, you know, there are these little things like from my childhood, like people used to call me the milkman's daughter. And I was like, I'm not, and my mom would always say, you're not adopted, which I wasn't, but they didn't, say.
Oh my gosh.
So, and then my sister played softball and she had a team dinner, like, before a game, they had team dinners at their house. And she had a team dinner at the house, and a girl walked into our house and said, I didn't know that, Jennie, you know, our last name was related to you. And she was like, yeah, she's my sister. And they were like, no, because we're so different. Like, and even then, that little thing, never. I was just like, it's so, what is the deal?
I mean,
People don't look like.
Why would you? Why would you think anything else? But I know that I say that every week, but
I know.
I like siblings can be different.
Yes, totally. So, and we were very opposite. But just little things like we had a family picture done when I was a kid. And even to this day, I look at that picture and I remember staring at that picture as a kid and trying to find like who looks most like my dad, who looks like my dad's side of the family. Now, if you put a picture of my cousin, who's not even his son, and my dad next to each other at the same age, they look identical.
Uh-huh.
So there's some strong genes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah.
I always struggled to find like, how are we related? Who do we look like? Do I look like my grandma? And my mom was always telling us, that's for me. You get that from me. So there were all these little like innuendos, so to speak.
Right. Do you think that not spending time with your grandparents for very much or for the holidays, do you think that was related to being donor?
I don't know.
Donor
So
kids?
yeah,
Okay.
so now I do think that, and so that's the crazy thing. Like my mom said that she never told her parents, her side of the family. She's like, I'm not sure if they ever knew, right? So it's just something they didn't talk about. But with that being said, my parents fought a lot. They probably should have gotten a divorce. I never felt unloved or not loved, but my mom had some mental health issues. And she revealed some trauma recently from her childhood that she's never told anyone. So she never told anyone until her husband now, my stepfather, and then me and my sister just recently. So it like brings it full circle and it makes perfect sense, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't hate my mom and I'm not like, I'm more disappointed in her like that as an adult, she can't see because she says, if you wouldn't have done 23andMe, I would have never have told you. She still says that. So one of my new siblings and I reached out to owner and sent him a letter with pictures of different stages of our lives. And we just said, we don't want anything from you. Like, really, we have good lives. We're secure. We don't need anything, but we exist because of something that you did. So I think that whole generation is just taught to like shut things down and no one speaks. Right. About anything.
Yeah. That wasn't the agreement with donor conception. Like the agreement was no one will ever know I did this. This is totally anonymous. And for all parties, like it just wasn't, like,
oh yeah,
it's as if it didn't happen is sort of what they were promised. And so that's how they treat it. I think for a lot of people, they're just like,
until you marry one of your cousins.
Right. Like they're just like, oh no, like this was not a part of the deal. This was not a part of the package. Yeah. And I don't even mean it, necessarily like maliciously or like that they have a bad attitude about it. It's just like, I really think like their brains just don't, I don't, does not compute.
Some of this family has connected with us. We got, they've told us that he's advised family members not to speak to any of the donor conceived children. But my aunt showed up, his sister, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if but she won't respond to any of my emails. So I'm like, well, why did she test? Because she want to see how many were out there? You know what I mean? Because
it's very possible.
So I sent them a Christmas card this year, both of them. And I just sent it like I sent it to everybody else because I'm like, the fact of the matter is that as donor conceived people, I do think it's a beautiful thing. I always thought my parents' love story was so amazing, that she chose him, even though he was in a wheelchair and he went to college and he drove a car and, he didn't let that stop him from living his life being in a wheelchair. and that they were able to create a beautiful family. I think it's a magical thing, but it's certainly not anything to be ashamed of. And so I think that I can't judge her and say that if I had grown up in her time, I would have told everyone everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I do believe that that would have been very difficult in that time. But, I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that we asked him for medical information and he has never responded. So thankfully we have a cousin who's reached out and is helping us navigate. But like, I have low iron. I've always been anemic since I was a kid. We have a son who has allergies. We never knew where that came from. And then my half sister that I grew up with, we have two different donors. So she had been
Oh,
hospitalized with blood issues. And that was never a time that, my mom should have been like,
that might have been an opportunity.
here's your window. Yes. So, I get it. I get that that is hard. And, but like Brene Brown, are you familiar with
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brown?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Brene Brown talks about being vulnerable. And I wrote down something because says, she says, I think being vulnerable feels dangerous. I think it feels scary. And I think it's terrifying. This is what people say to her. But I don't think it's dangerous, scary, or terrifying as getting to the end of our lives and wondering, what if I would have shown up? What if I would have shared my hurts? What if we would have? So I think that generation now is feeling all those, like,
Mm-hmm.
I did, they know, like, I think my mom knows that she didn't do the right thing, but she's been so programmed growing up in that generation that we just don't talk about anything. My kids know that I see a therapist. My kids know I'm on an antidepressant. My kids know about this even,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that they have more cousins out there and more aunts and uncles. And, I feel like I believe in God and I believe that everyone has a purpose. And I really feel like maybe this is a part of why I'm here, is I'm supposed to break that cycle in our family of the shame and the secrets and the everything being held in. Because I think when we hold all of that in for so long, it just eats away at us and it makes us bitter and it makes us angry. And like, even for instance, my mom not sharing her childhood trauma, she's in her 70s.
Right.
I mean, she carried that and never told anyone for years. And so now it makes sense why,
Yeah.
she feels the way she does.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's hard to imagine holding multiple things for that long.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine it being of that generation and learning all these new ways, right? Like these new
Yes.
thoughts and theories. And Brené Brown didn't exist when they were
Yes.
when all our
Yeah.
moms were impressionable young women.
Yes.
And so reconciling the way the way they're programmed and neural pathways and the way the
Hmm.
world works with these new ideas, like that's got
Yeah.
to be hard and strange, and maybe for some people too hard and too strange. They can't
Yes.
they can't look at it, and others do get have the or embrace the opportunity to examine all of that. um but yeah, how interesting for you to be sort of handed this.
Like, I do believe that there's a time and there was a place. So I'm
Mhm.
disappointed. My dad died. He was diagnosed with cancer, and then 5 months later, he was gone. And I wrote him
Mm,
this letter and like how he was, amazing and all this stuff. But I also think that, wow, looking back, my mom and I's relationship hasn't always been the warmest, if you want to say, put it that way. And she told me once that my dad said that if you don't be careful, she's going to walk out of here and never come back. She told me that
mm,
after he had died. But, often we get along with like our friends' parents,
mhm,
and
mhm.
maybe was I close with my dad because he actually wasn't my blood relative.
Right.
I've gone into being a photographer, but I'm like so fascinated with sociology and why people act the way that they do. And, the whole thought of generational trauma and how we pass that on to our children. And So yeah, I just
Yeah.
think it's interesting. Like, why do we have these connections? So I was sad um, that my dad and mom didn't feel like, I don't think he should have told me on my deathbed, but I was 18, 19. I moved out of my house as soon as possible. I was like, I want to be on my own. I got to do this. If it takes 2 jobs, I'm going to do that. And no one felt like they should maybe tell me, be like, you're
Right.
18, you're doing fine, and
Mm-hmm.
here you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even now that I've had my kids and my family, and I let my mom, and every time I try to talk to my mom about it, she shuts down. She doesn't want to talk
Mm.
about it. She thinks I should leave the donor alone and not talk to him. So when I found this out, I had these 5 siblings, and one of them had found out when she was young,
Okay.
at age 12, but back then she didn't have any access to
Right.
23andMe or yeah.
So it's
So
just an
she's
idea.
known
It's
this.
just like this idea out there.
Yeah. So
Right.
she had
Wow.
known this whole time. So all these years she had done this research, connected with the family, and she's kind of like the person who taught when a new sibling pops up, she is ready
She's the
to like give.
diplomat. She's the
Yes,
diplomat. Yeah. The ambassador, the donor
yes.
ambassador. Mm-hmm. I feel like every sibling group has one.
Yes, yeah. So she's great. And she'll be like, we have a new sibling, and she'll post about it. But this is my first time speaking publicly about it. Like, I've never shared anything on my social media. I've never shared anything on Facebook or Instagram but everybody knows. Like, if I saw you on the street, I'd be like, oh my God, they're like, where are you
Mm-hmm.
from? Who are your parents? I'm like, blah.
You're like, buckle up. It's incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
So when you connected with those 5 siblings, were you the newest person? Did everybody know before you? All those 5, they
Yes.
all were already in communication and knew?
Yeah.
Or,
So 4 of them were already in connection and knew. One of them has never reached out to any of us. So he shows up as a half brother on all of our 23andMe's. We've all reached out to him. He's never connected ever.
mm-hmm.
And then the donor has 2 sons that he raised on his
Okay.
own.
Okay.
And they're on Facebook, but their Facebooks are locked down,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
probably since like 2015, since everyone
Right.
started showing up, right?
Right.
You see 2015 and then nothing else.
Right. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Like, oh, interesting. So my husband and I went to Washington last fall, and we met 3 of the siblings, half siblings, and a cousin. So that was cool. And then right over the 4th of July, another sibling popped up, and she, went through the shock. She was like, thank you everyone for being so warm and welcoming. And then she her account,
She just
which
needs,
is fine.
right.
Right.
Sometimes you just, yeah.
I had to step away, all the information that's fed to you and your whole life, you're told this narrative, right? And then you're grieving. I loved my father. He was amazing. I know he was a person, he was a human. And, my mom says he did things, and I don't need to know about those things. He's not here to defend himself, but we're all human. Nobody's perfect. We've all made mistakes. I think, though, that it saddened me to think like I would look at my son, our oldest son, and I would be like, oh my gosh, he just looks like my dad. He has these sunken in eyes. He looks so much like him. And then you have that grief of, wow, like he's not related to him.
It's just a coincidence.
Yeah, totally. So I think you missed that so that's why it's been so helpful to work through your workbook, is like really touching base on those things of like, what makes me tick and why does this hurt? And some things that maybe that unthought known that I had always kind of had, maybe I didn't. I kind of always knew something was different, but I didn't know how to like pinpoint it.
Mm-hmm. How can you speak at all to what your sister's experiences was like of finding out about this?
Yeah, so my sister that I grew up with, she once she found out she did 23andMe, and her donor popped up.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was just too much for her to handle.
Okay. Yeah.
She never reached out to him. And he never reached out to her or emailed her, but she never searched for her family. She knew that I was like searching, but she never reached out or,
Yeah.
anything to him. So,
yeah. That's so interesting because I have been slowly, I talked about it in a couple episodes ago, maybe 5, I don't know, when I did a woman named Freya Lyon, and she has a sibling, and another I did Kira Shu, who was another episode. Anyway, almost always, if there are two siblings, one is incredibly interested in the donor experience,
yeah.
and the other is not.
Oh, yeah.
For whatever reason. So, right? Like it's something, the other sibling. It's so interesting.
So I do think like my sister was so close with my dad, and I really don't think that she ever got over his death, and that was 20 years ago. But I just think for her, it was like too much. And then one thing after another happened in her life, this like domino effect of things. We lost our dad, and then my grandfather died, and then my uncle died, and then, just this chain of events. And I just think it was just too much for her to like sort of, and too exhausting too. Like, I feel like I am so like, I want to know more, and I'm always searching, and I'm getting on Ancestry and looking for, and it's like this story piece. But for her, I just think it may have been too much, it was too much. But now that she's gone, I've expressed to my brother-in-law, like, hey, if, when the time is right, if you want to hand over her 23andMe and Ancestry accounts to me, and I will manage them. And then if your kids, when they get older, have any questions or they want to explore, or, then at least like I'm a safe person for them to do, you know what I mean? So they're not going in like cold turkey, I don't know, or blinded. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand feeling too overwhelmed by it. Especially if you have a sibling that is demonstrating enthusiasm for it. Maybe that gives some people a break. Like the other sibling is like, okay, good, you take it.
Like you go ahead and do whatever.
I cannot even, I can't deal.
Yeah. I do think that there's a piece though that's like, for me, that's like, this whole vulnerability piece and speaking our truth and having the right to know. There's so many studies that say that if you adopt a child, that child from birth, from a young age, should always know that they're adopted, And so we have friends. I have a friend who's been adopted. She's always known. So it's always been a part of her narrative, So now at 45, I'm like, looking for things. And then we have these pictures of my new sibling group, and we look alike. You don't walk down the street and you're like, oh my gosh, you're related, but you can see the similarities. And then the new sibling that popped up, and my other sibling that was going to be on today, when you put their pictures together, they look like they could be twins. And two of the other girls look like they could be twins. And so there's 8 children altogether of his, 4 boys, 4 girls. And the 3 oldest were all born in the same month, like within a week of each other.
Oh, wow.
So I think I really have a passion now for just raising awareness, and talking to people and, raising awareness that, because, no one kept records and there was a flood somewhere.
Yeah, there's always a fire.
There was a fire or a flood, and we don't have any of those things anymore, So, and like I know you've talked about before, there won't be any more secrecy anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so going forward, I think there should always be, you need to be updating your information. And when that child's 18, they have a right to know. And you know what I'm saying? I think that my parents' generation was so in the thought of like they owed, like he owes me something, like if I'm contacting him, we must want something. Right. And I'm like, I had a dad And I know that's not the case for everyone. I know that some people had horrific childhoods. And so they're looking for that father figure and they're like, well, I found my father. So now we can have that relationship.
I just think the possibilities are endless, and that can be too scary for some people, donors.
Oh, yeah.
And I also think that that generation, or parents' generation, I don't know how to describe this exactly, but the era or like dawn of like internet scams,
Mm-hmm.
that happened when they were already adults. Like that started to happen, I don't know, in the 90s, whenever the internet started to happen, right? And I think my mom and my dad, like, they're really scared. They're really scared of like people on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, this idea that someone would reach out and say this thing, my mom is constantly like, oh, that's not real. That's careful. That is a Russian bot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know that she knows what a Russian bot is, but
Yeah.
she's like, oh, that's like, so I think they got the fear of that got really like hammered into them. I don't know, maybe I'm making excuses and defending people
Oh,
unnecessarily, but
no,
I
I
think
think,
that is a part of it. And then added to that, the endless possibilities of what a real relative
yeah.
could want.
Oh, yeah. Well, and two, I think like I asked my mom to test. I was like, I really want you to test because deep in my heart, I feel like there's something. So I asked my mom, did you have an adopt? Did you give up a baby? Did you
Mm-hmm.
like all the things, right? And she says no, but there's something in me now that's like, what else is there that
Mm-hmm.
I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, will you test? And she was like, absolutely not. I'm not testing. I'm not giving my DNA to the government. Ironically, she was in the army. She was a nurse in the army. Yeah. So I'm like, guess what? They already have everything they want on you. They know where you live. And I'm not trying to be like, oh, but
Right.
I really believe that. Like, you signed your life over. They know everything about you they want to know. And I told her, I was like, listen, I've had 3 kids. I've had my wisdom teeth removed. I've given blood. If someone wanted my DNA, they have it by now.
Yeah, there's lots of ways. Lots of
Yes,
ways for them to get it.
but that's so foreign for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Foreign, scary. Do you have any thoughts on or feelings about your mom and dad going to his parents to ask about what they would prefer, a donor or adoption, or however that conversation really went?
My dad was the oldest of 4 boys. And so I do find it interesting. Like, why would you even care?
Right.
So it's like, well, why did you go to them? Did you go to
Mm-hmm.
them for money? Was it a money thing? Like, did you need money? So you went to them because, you sometimes people just get pregnant. They didn't spend any money.
So getting
to come.
pregnant can totally be free,
Yes,
but not always.
but not always. So I don't know if it was a money thing, but I think, and then so I really don't know how that,
Hmm.
but knowing my grandparents, my grandmother didn't even have her driver's license. She was from Canadian descent. So, so then there's that dynamic, right? My
Right.
grandfather was in the Navy. My grandmother married him. They lived in the US. She didn't have a driver's. I mean, I could go a lot of places with that whole 50s, 40s.
Yeah, it's just curious. It's curious. Of
Yeah.
course, no way to know, but especially knowing he's the oldest of 4 boys. So the likelihood of a name and bloodline continuing is very
Yeah.
good. So it's
Yes.
not like they had to come and be like, we have some super bad news, like it ends here.
Yeah.
How should we handle it? Or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, yeah, probably may have been a very innocent conversation or normal conversation about the funding for this kind of thing. And
Yeah.
but it's just, of course, curious.
But my dad and cousin who look alike, they're my dad and his brother were 11 years apart, the youngest. So the two middle passed away. The two middle boys passed away, and one of them
Mm,
passed away when my mom and dad were dating. And so my uncle that was the youngest, he was in high school when my parents were dating. So when he grew up, got married, had kids, so I'm the oldest, and then the youngest, we're 16 years apart. But now if you put a picture together, I found a picture of them the other day. They look so, all that time apart, the DNA is still there. They look so much alike. So I do wonder if my mom's parents ever wondered, but with my parents' background of fighting, they separated at a time, they got back together. I do wonder about what, with keeping that secret with only them, what did that do to their marriage? Not being able to speak their truth and talk about it and be honest about their struggles. Because I feel like that there's this part of like when we keep secrets and we hold all that in, we're kind of in the dark, right? We just fester all this bitterness and we're in the dark and it's only ours to keep.
Yeah.
But when we step out of it and, be honest, then it's like a light shines. There's so much weight taken off of us. And I'm not saying go out and tell everybody everything you've ever done. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying with people you love and trust and, honor, that they can be a safe place. There's someone safe that you can tell. And I'm an open book. I'm just like, this is how it is. And if you don't, like it, then that's kind of your deal. But I've found more that people open up and I have more authentic, true relationships.
Right.
When I let that vulnerability piece down. So looking back at my parents, it's like what kept them, like they separated. Why didn't
It seems impossible not to wonder what role it played in their
it's like,
relationship.
why didn't they get divorced? Did they not get divorced? Because then they would have had to be like, well, your dad's not your dad. And then when I would be like, well, what were you like when you were a kid, Dad? And like, how did he feel? Like, did he had to have, right? He's a human, just been like, you don't get anything from me. You know what I'm saying? Like, but maybe they didn't tell us because he was afraid we would disown him, which is, can see that with some kids. I can see like when I was a teenager, why they didn't tell me, because I could have been like, well, you're not my dad and I don't have to listen to you.
Right. Yep. I relate to that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I like to think that I wouldn't have, but teenager, so I can see how that could have been used. I just wonder how keeping that all in affected their relationship and affected my grandparents, so my mom's parents lived in the same city as us. And we were always told that we moved there because my grandfather was sick and they wanted to be closer, which I totally get. But was it because of, I mean, did my grandma ever wonder, like, do like they fight? My parents fight all the time and all this stuff. And so my grandmother, my dad's mother, my mom says that she would have to call her and remind her of our birthdays and like, are you going to send a gift? And she would send a check and my mom would buy her gifts and say that it's from grandma. And so I'm like, but then when we saw her, I never felt like she didn't not like me,
Right.
But when you hear those when you hear things, you're, you wonder, well, was it hard for her because she knew we weren't related? I don't know. It's just, it's all the things that you go over in your.
Right. And there's no way to get answers to any of that, but it's hard not to just wonder what role donor conception played in all of it.
Yes. So we're on a like sibling group text. We talk, a few of us talk like at least once a month, just check in and say, how's it going? And then the sibling that was going to be on today, her and I talk often, but her and I have a lot in common. We're both runners and our kids like kind of look alike, which is crazy. And so we have a lot in common that way. And she was actually born in the same year my sister was born that I grew up with. So when that popped up, I told my neighbor, I was like, did my dad have an affair? The same.
Right. Trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Trying to figure it all out. Yeah. So it's interesting, but it's hard because, you have your own lives too.
Are they all in Washington?
They're all in Washington. Yeah. And so we all like have our own lives, and I'm like ready to dive in, and I'm like, let's get to know each other. But we also have like kids, and we're doing this thing and we're doing that thing.
Yeah, it's so hard.
It's so complicated, but I do think it's something to be celebrated. At the same time, I think it's kind of amazing. And yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't have a whole lot of bitterness about it. It's kind of like I always wanted a brother, and now I have three brothers.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of brothers.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. That's kind of just where I am. I feel like, telling my story will hopefully help other people just be like honest with themselves and.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think time and time again, we just keep hearing back that hearing that you're not alone is so powerful. And telling one's story is healing to the person telling it and healing to people hearing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so thank you for being a part of that.
Yeah.
It's been sort of an honor to listen to be a space where people can do that. And do you have advice for anybody that's brand new?
Oh, I feel like pause. Take a pause. It's really important to take a pause, because I think like I am excited now in the moment, right? But I called my husband at work and was like, I have 8 half siblings. And he's like, wait, what? You know, and then the oldest sibling told me all this, or the oldest girl told me all the things, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And then you do go to the place of like, is this a scam? Did these people get my name? Is this for real? Like, what is happening? And
do I have to wire them $1,000 to prove that we're related? And then they'll give it back?
yes, totally. I think my biggest advice is just take a second. And if it takes you a month or it takes you a year, or and if you're in a sibling group and you do have a new sibling pop up, I think it's really important to be respectful of their time too. It's overwhelming. It rocks your world. And, it's so hard to hear parents say, if I hear one more person tell me it doesn't matter because your dad is your dad,
right,
or it doesn't change anything. I'm sorry, excuse my language, but that's a bunch of bullshit, because it does change. It changes everything.
Right.
Everything has changed,
Yeah.
And my dad was an amazing man, but he is not biologically my father. So none of my character traits, none of my, there's that whole nature versus nurture piece. Everything's changed. So I think it's really important just to respect where people are at. If they want to dive in, that's good, but just take baby steps and take your time to digest.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere.
Right. Your blood's in there. I think that's such good advice. Respect the pace of other people's process, and take a minute. I was just thinking about the marketing. I don't know that it was designed as a marketing slogan, but your dad is still your dad comes from such this blank slate idea that any baby, and
oh yeah.
So I was just thinking that, like, wow, that is a marketing slogan that has really permeated our culture.
Even if you think about not being a donor conceived person, but if you're thinking about like the people whose parents had affairs, right? And those men who raised those children in the back of their head, knowing it wasn't their child, but they didn't want to speak the truth and rock the boat. So they raised those children,
Yeah.
And so it's just like, I just think it's really important to be respectful of the situation. But I'm not.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's just so much more complex than the words "your dad is still your dad" allows there to be any space for. It's just deeper than that. And
yes, 100%. Yeah. So I didn't get on the horn and email the whole family and be like, guess what? This is what happened. And that's why I haven't shared on. I am writing a book. And if it never gets published, then it never gets published. But I'm telling you that your workbook and journaling, seeing my therapist, I highly recommend a therapist. If you have a DNA surprise, whatever it is, a donor conceived person or, whatever it is, I think you need to talk to somebody. So it's been so extremely helpful for me to have somebody that's outside of this situation to speak to and just release it all. So, but yeah.
Good. Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So that's about it. But I'm not keeping to say to that is I'm not keeping any secrets anymore. So if someone asked me about it, if a family member came to me, then I would tell them, but it's nothing that I'm like broadcasting, right now on. Yeah. I think 2 years then. I don't know. How long has it been since your DNA surprise?
It's been 5. It's been 5 years, like just 5 years.
Yeah. And I'm only in year 2.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's still, maybe a book will be published in 7 years. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much.
Like,
there's so much to happen. And 2 years in or 5 years in, it's still happening. Right. Like it's not over. Yeah. It's not like it was 2 years since it happened. You're 2 years in a process. So who knows? But I'm sure you feel like it's even evolved and changed and broadened for you in the 2 years. So who knows how it will continue to change for you.
Yeah. And even just like a grief journey, your grief journey goes, through hills and valleys. And so I think that's the same.
Yeah.
For this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my story.
That's your story. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's just so nice to have someone that just wants to I don't know how to explain it, but just like come on and tell their story, and you're doing it for you and you're doing it for others.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
And it's straightforward, straightforward. It's simple. I appreciate that a lot. So great. And I love having some more donor conception. I need more of that this season. So
yeah, well, maybe my siblings and we can all come on.
Oh man, if you could rally them, that would be really fun.
Yeah, but thank you. I want to thank you so much for I know this can be hard. I've run a business. I know this isn't necessarily a business, it's an outreach, but I feel like I know what the work is, all the work that you put into it. And so I really appreciate you being here, talking to people. And it's so nice to just be able to get on. And sometimes I just need to listen to other people's stories, and even to have your workbook. Like there's nothing like that out there. And many therapists don't even know. And so I feel like going to your therapist with your workbook, it's like a way for you to learn together. So it's really been great.
Oh, great. Good. That's what I hoped for it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's lovely to hear. I'm so glad that that's working well for you. I really am.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm really wanting to get involved in the advocacy part and the importance of people telling their story and the whole right to know. And like Colorado's one of the only states that has made it a law now.
Good.
That, people have to tell, if you're a donor or whatnot. So yeah, I just see myself going forward, kind of like advocating in that way.
That's great.
Somehow. Great. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for your patience.
This worked out. This worked out. I mean, this worked out great. Okay. That's it. So have a great rest. What day is it? It's Monday. So
it's Monday.
Beginning of the week. All right.
You can do this.
All right. You have a great rest of your week too.
Okay.
All right. Bye, Jenny.
Wait, are you gaming? On a Chromebook?
Yep. It's got a high-res 120Hz display, plus this killer RGB keyboard. And I can access thousands of games anytime, anywhere.
Stop playing.
What?
Get out of here.
Huh?
Yeah, I want you to stop playing and get out of here so I can game on that Chromebook.
Got it.
Discover the ultimate cloud gaming machine. A new kind of Chromebook.
Okay, I feel a little bit silly. I just said that thing about appreciating an episode that's straightforward and that isn't promoting something. And then Jennie went and talked about my journal like a lot. So, hey, it's America. Everyone is selling something. Welcome to the land where every house is a hotel. Every car is a taxi. Gotta respect the hustle, I guess. If you are interested in the journal that Jennie was talking about, you can find it on my website, www.everythingsrelativepodcast.com. Of course, you can find it on Amazon. It's called Who Even Am I Anymore? A process journal for the adoptee, late discovery adoptee, donor-conceived, MPE, and NPE communities. I made it. It's a book full of open-ended questions that I thought might help a person like me or you process this existential crisis and wonderings of a DNA surprise. You can do it on your own. You can do it with a therapist. You could do it with a group of friends. And also, I offer a therapeutic process group online where we work through it together. We meet once a week, and the next one starts September 7th. So reach out if that sounds interesting to you. Okay, this was episode 97. Hilariously, I'm not sure if that's right. I may have a different number count than like Apple Podcasts, which is funny and kind of on brand. So I'm just going to stick with it. So according to me, we have 3 more episodes to episode 100. And I hope by the time you hear this episode with Jennie, me and Jennie, that I have figured out what I'm doing for that 100th episode. I told Joy, my editor, that I wanted cake. I invited Dawn Anderson from Missing Pieces podcast. Both were enthusiastic. So hopefully something's happening. Come back next week for episode 98. See what else I've put together for myself. For us. Put together for us. And while you're waiting, don't forget to make sure you've subscribed to the podcast, you've written a review, you've shared it with all your friends. Blah, blah, blah. Deal? My daughter, Margot, has this new idea about the word deal. She's always coming up with things, and then she sticks her hand out and says, deal? At the end. Like I'll actually shake her hand. And it will be like ice cream for breakfast. Deal? No, not a deal. But hey, maybe she's on to something. You guys write a review, and I'll be back next week with a new episode. Deal? And while you're out there, don't forget to make that physical therapy appointment you've been meaning to make. Stop to smell the roses. And hey, next time you're there, thank the poor folks at the DMV. I mean, we're miserable we're there. Can you imagine how they feel working all day? Anyway, I'm Eve Sturgis. This is Everything's Relative. Bye-bye.
Everything's Relative with Eve Sturgis is produced by Eve Sturgis and Kaylin Egan and edited by Joy Rumel. Logo designed by Ivy McNally, and music is used with permission from Goodbye the Band. Eve is a licensed psychotherapist, but her podcast episodes are not therapy sessions.
I was always told that my dad is related to the Younger Brothers, and they were a gang that robbed Laura Ingalls Wilder. Yeah.
What? The Younger Brothers who robbed Laura Ingalls Wilder?
So I was like, oh my gosh, this is fascinating. Not that I want to be related to a gangster, but this is kind of cool,